I'm the admin assistant here if you don't know me. And just and just real quick, I know some of you are filling out forms. If anybody that's walked in the last couple minutes has not been here before, if you could just raise up your hand and I'll have a liability form for you. Just has emergency contact information. Anybody else need to fill a form or everybody good? Good? Okay. So I am very excited to announce my friend Courtney today. Courtney and I actually know each other from, whoever has read her book. She's talked about Pie Hill in the book, and that's where we met each other. We used to board together. And my horse, actually, Dee Dee, is in her book. This is my little claim to fame.
And the first horse I rode as an adult now lives in Michelle's beautiful barn. Yeah. So he's right up the road.
Yeah, so we've known each other for quite some time, so I was very excited to read this book when it came out, and I'm very excited to have Courtney here today to talk to everybody. Thank you. And then just real quick, again, if you've not been to Shepherd Meadows before, we do have, events and all sorts of programs from time to time, so we have some flyers, upcoming events on our bulletin board over there and also on the table over there.
You're doing a great job here.
We're very happy to be here. All right.
Thank you, everyone. Hi, I'm Courtney. I just want to start by, first of all, thanking you all for coming out. On a rainy day, it's very tempting to stay home on our couch. It's tempting to go to the barn too, but not so tempting when it's 40 degrees. So thank you for making the effort to be here. I also want to thank Shepherd's Meadows for having me. I'm honored to be here. This means a great deal. And thank you, Stacy, for coming out here, and also for owning a bookshop in times where that's not the most obvious way to earn an income, but we're so grateful and we need you real bad. So, when you are deciding to buy books, just know that if you're going with an independent bookstore, your money's going a lot further. It's going a lot further. It's helping the authors. It's helping small bookstore owners. It's helping towns. So I get it. Once in a while, we have to go to the dark place to get something. But more and more these days, it's pretty darn important, right? So thank you very much. Usually, I'm pretty good at projecting. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I'm kind of going to bounce between sitting down and standing up if that's all right. So I guess I'll start by introducing myself professionally. I'm an author. I have five books. I have a sixth on the way. I do novels and memoir and nonfiction. I also work as a book coach, an educator. I run my own writing workshop in New Mexico. I do a lot. And I'm a mom. I live in Norfolk, Connecticut. I've lived out in kind of the countryside for 20-something years now. My husband's French. I spent most of my 20s in France. And the way that I keep all my plates spinning and avoid a complete nervous breakdown is horses. Horses, animals also, but I often joke with my editors that I need a rider being like a contract that says I need a horse on book tour. Because if I'm not like smelling that special smell or just even seeing them, I don't need to ride every day. I'm very much like, just want to be around them. Doesn't even need to be my horse. But I want to watch them eat. I am upset. It's not even obsessed. Like there's a real link between me and horses, and more and more, I would say over the last 10 years, when it's not only that things have become so politically and financially and culturally strife, but it's also that we get everything now from so many directions, right? We have our phones, people are calling us and texting us, and there's Facebook messages, there's mail, there's old school mail, right? And especially in my world where my life is really tethered to my computer and the internet, and readers, staying connected to readers, the simple act of watching livestock, horses definitely, but really livestock just model for me the need for affection, shelter, and food. perhaps dryness, but yeah, shelter, affection, food, treats, whatever, helps me reset, you know, when I'm starting to feel a little anxious. I just think, wait, well, go back to the basics. You have a beautiful house, you have a family, you have a healthy daughter, you have a horse, a beautiful horse. I have a blue roan quarter horse who I bought for myself in December. And yeah, I think I just want to start on that positive note. Some of the things I'll be talking about today, there's not really trigger warnings, but I will be talking about depression and struggles with mental health. If you need a break, the bathroom's there. I won't be offended if you need to go out, but we're keeping things PC. So I think I want to check I want to start by doing a little poll. So who here is an animal lover?
Oh.
All right. Do we have any cat people?
Oh.
Okay. Dog people? Okay. I was raised, inside of me is a dog lover, but I was raised with 5 Saint Bernards in my house.
Oh, wow.
It's gonna take me a couple more decades. Birds,
Yeah?
fish, snakes,
No.
wild, exotic. No, actually, don't raise your hand if something else.
I taught with all of them, snakes, lizards.
Okay. All the
cats,
stuff.
horses.
Oh wow. Okay, so you can just keep your hand up. And then horses.
Spiders.
Is there anyone here who started off frightened of horses, or maybe still okay? Yeah, some fear of horses. If my husband were here, he would absolutely big fear of horses. So I'm gonna sit down for a little bit. I want to start off by talking about animals in general and how important they are to humans. Yes, in terms of affection and companionship, but how they actually help our mental health and our physical health. So as I mentioned, I'm a cat person. That being said, we're partial to Maine Coons, which are enormous cats. So they're effectively dogs. But I've been married 20-something years, and my husband and I, before we had our daughter, who's 11 now, we had this gorgeous Maine Coon cat. But as with large breed animals, he had heart problems, and he passed away when he was 8. And it took us 5 years to get over that before. So our second cat, who's in our life right now, is the noisiest purrer. And he's obsessed with human contact, but he's so loud. He also snores really loudly. His name's Chester. And it was sort of becoming a problem because I'm a terrible sleeper, which I talk about in the book. I have chronic insomnia, and I love this cat, and I love that he wants to be with us, you know, but I can't sleep. He's so loud. And then I went to an arts lecture, I think last summer. In Norfolk, we have the Yale School of Art and Music, where they bring out all these wonderful artists all summer to give free lectures. So if you're around this summer, come check it out. And last summer, a really, really famous Mexican-American artist named Guadalupe Maravilla came out, and he does these huge art installations that involve sort of live instruments, but his whole thing's about vibration. And the whole beginning of his lecture was dedicated to how in his culture, for many Mexican Americans, cats are considered somewhat sacred because their vibration can be healing. And so if a cat chooses to sit on your chest especially, yes, it's affectionate, but it's also sometimes they sense something and they're trying to vibrate enough to heal it. And they're actually, I have more like stats, in 2001, the bioacoustician Elizabeth von Muggenthaler, she measured the vibrations of the cats and found that they were vibrating in frequencies from 25, 50, all the way to 100, is it hertz? Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, I forgot to. And that's a high enough frequency to do some like ligament repair or even low cartilage repair. It's really wild. So the next time someone's cat, so now when my cat comes into bed with me, I put in my earplugs and I'm like, work away. Like, go on my knee because I have a knee. And then for those of you who are on Instagram or Facebook or any of these places, you might have seen over the last, I think it's 2 years, more videos of horses, not just mini horses, but full-size horses being brought into nursing homes, right? And if anyone's like me, I can't watch a second of those videos without just bursting into tears. So obviously, I'm sure many of you know how frequently therapy animals, cats, dogs, are used in nursing homes to help people alleviate loneliness, struggles with dementia, tactility issues. There's mental loneliness and then there's physical loneliness too, right? Which sometimes that can be a lot worse. But one of the reasons that horses are starting to be brought in, especially for people who are struggling with nervous disorders like dementia, is that they have horses have a electromagnetic field around their heart that's 5 times the size of ours. So as many of you, if you've ever gone to approach a horse, yours or someone else's, in a field or at a gate, and it's a friendly horse, perhaps not a chestnut mare in the spring, but I had a chestnut mare, I say that with love. But, and generally if the horse is welcoming your approach, I feel, I suppose I'll speak for myself, that I'm entering a kind of bubble. I think I know that psychosomatically I feel my shoulders start to drop, I start to slow my breath and my heart, and in fact what's happening is that they're basically pulsating out their preferred heart rate and trying to tell me to drop mine to theirs. And that kind of emotional balance, the psychosomatic meeting, is something I'm going to talk a lot about in my personal experience with horses. So horses for me, I grew up on the other side of Connecticut, and when I was a young girl, 5 or 6 years old, I did ride, but ride, I thought I was like great, but when I look back, I realized that I was just put on, what do you call them, like point and shoot ponies. I thought it was hot shit, but I don't think so. But that came to an end when I was about 8 or 9. My parents split and everything got kind of crumbled. And I already knew at that point, that young, that I wanted to be a writer. And I remain a pretty realistic lass, very pragmatic. And just from looking around me and realizing I didn't know a single author, my parents weren't friends with authors, like these people didn't exist in my sightline as a profession, I said to myself from a young age, okay, well, you're not going to have a lot of money, you're going to have to work hard, writing is hard, you won't earn money, so the horses are behind you. Like I understood that even if I wasn't paying for it, thanks Dad, appreciate it, I recognized obviously like, okay, this takes a certain amount of resources. And so I really started my kind of teenage life, like that was a really fortunate part of my life, and it is behind me. And I think I went out of my way. I mean, you all know how it is. It's not that hard. It is a secret underworld, The farms are not always, certainly they're not in cities, right? So there is a way that you can shut yourself off from it. So I shut myself completely off from it, so much so that when I got married in 2005, my husband had no idea that I had this past life as a horse girl. Like none at all. I could have told him I was in prison, he would have been as surprised. So everything was like pretty fine until around 2015. At that point, I had a daughter. She was 2 years old. We were living in a log cabin in the southern Berkshires in a really, really rural town. And a couple things were coming together in my life that were pushing me to the brink, we'll put it that way. Professionally, things were looking really good. I had my first book, which is called I'm Having So Much Fun Here Without You, come out, and I don't have a traditional trajectory into writing. I did not study English, I didn't study creative writing, I didn't do workshops, I don't have a Master of Fine Arts, I just read and wrote and worked hard. So I had no idea really what to expect from a book publication, but it was a huge success, that book. It was on like the Today Show and all these things. And so it had me traveling, nationally on book tour a lot, but at the very same time, my husband's a filmmaker and I write movies with him. And one of his films had been accepted at Sundance, so we were also touring for that. I was working in advertising, because life as an author, you don't get an annual income and you don't get health insurance. So I was doing a lot, but I was also, first time parenting, and perhaps I could have handled it except for this chronic insomnia that I had mentioned, which I only recently found out has a big physical cause from having had braces too young. I just wrote about that this week, and we can talk about that maybe toward the end, but at this point in my life in 2015, I had been told for 30 years that I was high-strung, neurotic lady, who needed to take baths or whatever. And my insomnia around 2015 was also, I wasn't living very far from Sandy Hook, and gun control has always been something that's deeply important to me, and I really thought that something would change greatly when all these innocent children were murdered. And when it didn't, I cracked. I mean, I don't know, I lost it. In contention with everything, all the pressures in my professional life, I really kind of had a long-term mental collapse, and it manifested in me just absolutely not sleeping anymore. I don't sleep a lot as an insomniac, but I could not sleep. And I was going so long without sleep, I literally started shedding weight. I couldn't keep weight on. I was getting ulcers in my mouth. I couldn't drive a car, on and on. And as one can imagine, if you've had a poor night's sleep, you're not a great person to anyone you might be living with. So my marriage was real rocky. My daughter and I couldn't have an interaction that didn't end in one of us collapsing into tears. Things were getting incredibly rough. And my husband and I were even talking about divorce. And I didn't really have people to talk to about this because we lived in such an isolated place. And given that my book had just come out and it was a big success, in my profession, there's a lot of sort of posturing. It's like, it's changing a little bit, but it's so important to present as grateful and honored and humble about the success you're having. So I just really didn't have someone I could go to and say, yeah, I'm so glad the book is doing really well, but I'm a mess, right? So I went on, a wild, picture kind of a movie montage, right? Of like Courtney trying all the things from both Western medicine, Eastern medicine. So I got into talk therapy. I was diagnosed with a severe depression. They put me on antidepressants, which made me even more wired. So then they gave me strong, like Ambien, which made me incapable of talking and really contributed to major digestive issues. I went to see, an energy therapist, acupressure, acupuncture, all the things, and nothing was getting me to sleep. And I just didn't understand how I could continue living, And one day I was and also I think it's worth saying that at that time in my life, I was like a reluctant mom, partly because if you read the book, motherhood was modeled for me in a completely selfless manner. You erase yourself and you don't really get yourself back ever, but good for you, that's the sacrifice necessitated by mothering, and that was not none of that I wanted to do because my art really comes first. So it was also at this, 2-year-old, right? So going to all these awful birthday parties for like toddlers, and there was one at a very good friend's house in my neighborhood, and I showed up, and there was a piñata and all these little 2-year-olds with bats. And I have a weird thing about piñatas. I've always found them beautiful as objects, but I think they promote domestic violence. Like I find it really upsetting to see children at a party splitting an animal open, and then eating the optics are a little rough, right? So if you can imagine, like, I haven't slept more than like an hour and a half in 3 months. I'm 20 pounds less than I am now, like not in the happiest place, and I'm watching these kids just whack this piñata. And then my friend, because we're moms, right, she was like, oh, will you stay and help me clean up after? And I was like, this is not the one like life that I, what the hell? And in walks this man late to the party, and I'd never seen him before, extremely tall, very debonair, not exactly telegraphing heterosexual, right? But he had on a barn coat, and he comes up to me, because I'm with the hostess, and he says, oh, I would give you a kiss, but I've just come from the barn, and I smell, and just that word, like, something cracks through 35 years of avoiding this totally obsessive former passion. And I grabbed this poor man by his like Burberry barn coat. I grabbed him and I said, "What barn? Where?" And he was like, "Oh God!" Like, it's like it's Whitebridge, in Litchfield. And of course, I'm looking at him and I'm like, "You can't afford this place. He looks expensive." But I was like, "What's her name?" I made him write down the trainer's name, which is Katja Ayers. She specializes in dressage. And I went into the backyard, wasn't thinking at all about any ramifications, financial or otherwise. Went to the backyard of this terrible party and called her, and she answered, and I scheduled my first comeback lesson as a rider, as an adult rider at about 37 years old. And it was funny because that lesson I think was that same week. So I had to have this whole catch-up conversation with my husband, right? Like, hey, whatever, I just need to go and scratch the itch. I used to be really big into riding, but whatever, you just pretend I'm going out for brunch, with friends. And then he never saw me again. But in fact, people might say, oh, it's like bicycle riding, which honestly, if you get back on a bike after 30 years, you don't remember how to bike. It's kind of weird. But I remembered having two thoughts. One was, man, I clearly wasn't as good as I thought I was, because she kept me on the lunge line when you're attached? I was like, I'm 37, Katja, and she's like, you have to be safe, And then the second thing was that this was going to change my life, that this was going to get me out of the dark hole. And that was when I was 37, so almost 10 years ago. I'm 46 now. And so I want to move in now to talking about the 4 specific ways that I think that horses, specifically interaction with horses, have made me a better person and others around me. The first one is sisterhood, right? So the kind of low-hanging fruit in the sisterhood chapter is, and I mean chapter of my life, not a chapter in the book, although certainly it's addressed, and Michelle's in it, and her beautiful horse, Dee Dee, who's college roommates with my then horse Harley. But the sisterhood that you get from actual human women of all ages, in any kind of barn scenario. In this book, I go on a rather wild trajectory. For someone who has a terrible seat, I end up learning polo. And one of my best friends in the book is a 12-year-old named Lizzie, and we're still very good friends. But I realized I hadn't been experiencing female friendship of this very specific, totally straightforward type, like maybe ever in my life. Because certainly in my line of work, all we do all day is craft the way that we're presenting ourselves orally, like working on our words. Even, you put up an Instagram caption, most of my writer friends were paying attention, we're being careful. And we're intellectual people, so when we're talking, often we're always thinking about our words. And the women I started meeting at the barns, it was all body, it was all physical, right? It was what's going on the horse, what's going on with me, what's going on with my body. And all of a sudden, all of the discussions started with the body. And I realized that I hadn't been in my body for years. I'd been like disassociating from my body. And in the beginning, I was a terrible writer, for that exact reason. And it was so cool, because instead of, pretending for 4 years with close neighbors or friends that like everything's fine, right away, either the instructor or a friend would say, "You're not breathing. Your shoulders are too high. Your jaw is clenched. You're grabbing him with your knees." Which, like, that is a way of saying you're grabbing him with your knees, but that's also a way of saying you're stressed, you're anxious, you're presenting as anxious. And so they were providing this therapeutic feedback loop without necessarily realizing that it was happening. So the human sisterhood was amazing, and I really value and continue to value that. I meet all these women that on paper we might not have anything in common with, but like we will ride at dawn for each other. It just, nothing matters except this passion that we have and the well-being of our animals and helping each other out. And it, to me at least, it supersedes like politics and all that stuff. And I really value that, especially coming from an intellectual profession where you're forced to choose camps quite often. And then the other aspect of it was sisterhood with mares. My first lease when I got back to riding is Harley, who's at Michelle's, had this incredible, like once in a lifetime strawberry roan quarter horse. He's very much in the book. Now, that was absolutely the best horse for me to come back to riding on, but I graduated from him and got a little bit above my pay grade in terms of skills and rescued an abused racehorse chestnut mare, thoroughbred. And as challenging as she was, she's retired now at the thoroughbred, what is it called? The TRF, Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation. She got me thinking about my own gender and mares in a completely different way. Especially a racehorse, an abused racehorse. And she had graduated into polo, she was a polo pony, but she was just a fighter. You could not tame this horse. And male players were always drugging her to try to play her, because she'd get abscesses and they would drug her, but she just didn't put up with it. And when I rescued her, I'd been told that the player had always drugged her in the trailer because she would rear, and she's just such a fighter. And I started thinking about how mares, right, female horses, over time, especially in the racing industry and polo, are so appreciated for their beauty, sometimes their ability to reproduce or not reproduce, but once their function is done, because they've either been broken or they're old, they're just discarded, they're really quite frequently discarded. And I also thought about how frequently, and I participate in this trope myself, but so frequently we say, oh, mayor is difficult, oh, the mayors are so difficult. And women, we're often treated as, oh, women, they're so difficult. And this is part of my sleep journey it's almost 40 years, 37 years. I've been going to every doctor under the sun to try to find out I cannot sleep. I haven't been able to sleep since I was 9. And the therapist and all the doctors said, oh, it's your parents divorced at 9. So that's when you started getting stressed out and have control issues, and you have to do yoga and let go and drink hot milk, I'm like, some of that is true, but it can't all be true. And it was only a year and a half ago I finally ended up at an ear, nose, and throat doctor who did like tongue exams and jaw exams, and he said that having braces when I was 8 stunted my jaw. My jaw never grew correctly. My tongue kept growing. And that over time, my nasal passages had completely collapsed from the infrastructure not matching up with the mothership, right? Like the jaw was too small. So teenagehood was sort of okay, but once I hit my 20s, everything collapsed, and then I haven't gotten the right amount of air. I've been getting 30% of the air that I was supposed to, and I had a bunch of nasal surgeries that have made it better, but back to the horses, I would think like, God, we're always saying, oh, they're so mayors are difficult, oh, mayors are difficult. But I thought, well, certainly there's another way to see this, which is maybe they have a higher form of intelligence or sensitivity or know things that we don't, or they're frustrated because we're not listening to them correctly, which was certainly what I experienced in my own life. So that's the first thing, like the big takeaway from the last 10 years or so of my life as a horsewoman is the sisterhood. And the second is fear as medicine. I'm a careful person. I'm a Virgo. I'm a type A. I like barely sled. I'm very frightened of getting hurt. But regardless of all that, despite all that, I still decided to learn polo at almost 40 years of age. And if you haven't read this book, lest you think this is going to be a typical sports memoir that ends in like finding out I'm an Olympian or something. That's not how it goes, but it is a story of not being very good at something and being very frightened of it and continuing to show up and do it over and over and over again. I was finding, especially in polo, because I had to bounce around from barn to barn when I was learning, but because of my age, I was often put into groups of older women riders who were maybe just walking and trotting, and I could have done that forever. I was happy doing that, but I knew I had to push myself. And the thing is, in polo, it's a huge liability if you're not moving with the hurt. You have to go fast or you'll get run into. And, I got into all these situations where I was trying to hold the horse back, and so they reacted even more poorly. And there were other situations where, these are hot thoroughbreds, right? Often. Sometimes they have quarter horses, but usually, these are thoroughbred mares, and they're ready to go. And I would get on an already nervous hot horse with all my nerves and my anxiety. And when I started learning polo, I was frequently bolted away with because I was just gripping, right? And just so stressed. I have my second part. So I really believe there's something to this horseback ride, the actual riding. Being on groundwork is amazing. But for people who struggle with control and fear and anxiety like I did, the best thing about a horse is if you want to be safe and you want to play it careful, you have to manage your breathing and you have to lower your heart rate. Nothing can protect you from a freak accident, but you're really setting yourself up for failure. If, just coming into the barn, walking down the aisle, if you've had a stormy day mentally, I'm sure you know that the horses might pin their ears, they might weave, right? That's fine if you're on the ground, but if you're getting on a horse distracted and stressed, right, they hear that. So I want to read a little excerpt of a real teaching moment for me. Has anyone here been to the Polo Club Mashomek in Pine Plains? It's not that terribly far. You should go this summer when it opens. It's pretty much the last club in the East Coast that allows people to come for free, and you can just have amazing picnics. And I call it something else in my book for legal reasons, because I was not a member and wasn't supposed to be there. But for financial reasons, I couldn't afford to play on the grass. So but if I went at like 5 in the morning and brought a bunch of Corona, the Dominican grooms would let me warm up the horses, and then we would scrimmage. So this scene, page 121? No, 221. And it was a great joy of me. So there's a gallop track at Mashomek that when you go at 5 in the morning, right, the cloud or the mist is rising. It's like so beautiful. And these are some of the happiest mornings of my life. And you pony a bunch of other horses. So you're on one horse mounted with a saddle, and then the others you're just ponying. But you do go through the walk and the trot and the canter, but it is supposed to be a canter, not what happened to me. So I'll read a little bit of this. It's called chapter 30, Tequila. It was an early morning like any other at the Upstate Club. Danny, Carlos, Victor, Leia, these are the grooms, and I were ready in the ponies for the gallop track. I was put on a horse I'd never ridden named Tequila, who from the moment we left the stable, nerved and twitched beneath me with unbridled energy. I could feel her exuberance and restlessness through my tack as we danced out of the barn with the extra horses at our side. "I've got a runner," I yelped, hoping that if I voiced my fear, I'd be better equipped to fight it. But true to form, none of the grooms acknowledged my doubts, because it would only coddle those doubts into becoming an actual problem. At my barn, they have the bumper stickers, "But did you die?" Right? Goes along. My husband was like, "What? Is that me?" So this is a "did you die" moment. Victor, he's the head barn manager, had told me time and time again that he would never put me on a horse I couldn't handle, and I reminded myself of that as we headed to the track, repeating another mantra that Allison, she was my motley polo coach, was always yelling at me. "Believe, Courtney, believe. Believe and breathe," I thought. "Don't let her feel you're anxious." But Tequila's energy only mounted as we approached the racetrack. I was too embarrassed by a scenario in which we all had to turn back so I could switch horses to try speaking up again. Inconveniencing my friends was a greater mortification than having mounted an animal that was too much horse for me. But once we hit the track, I knew I was in trouble. Tequila's head was high, her steps prancy. Her mouth pulled at the bit and her body surged. I managed to control her at the walk, but as our trot approached our 4th lap, when we habitually moved into the canter, she strained at the tack. We burst into a canter that soon became something else in the slow but fast-moving way you recall an accident. I can still feel my own reckonings with the quickening pace. This is fast, but is this too fast? Yes, it is too fast. We were racing by this point, Tequila, a high-goal polo pony at a professional grade gallop, faster than that because she had my panicked legs goading her on. Later, the grooms would tell me that I was clenching her too tightly. When the going gets rough, that's when you relax. This proved to be a challenge on the gallop track with 3 horses on a line. Around and around we went, the other barn's grooms yelling, "Más despacio," as we whizzed by. "Tengo un problema," I knew enough to answer. "I'm in trouble." I called out to Danny when I overtook his string. My team's speed was worsening, not slackening. I had so many horses with me and we were going so fast. Whatever accident befell me, it was going to be bad. I hadn't known slow, predictive fear like that since I saw the tree our car was headed for during our pivotal crash. This was a car accident I got in with my young daughter and husband. A fear nearing hysteria, a fear so belly deep it almost made me laugh. And this scene goes on, and eventually what happened was one of the grooms from our barn lined his horses up all across the track so that we either were going to jump them as a team or stop. And Tequila did stop. So this picks up again after Tequila stops. I was choked up when we halted, from fear, of course, but also from the realization that one of those grooms was going to lead me back to the barn, watch me put away the horses, and tell me that I could never ride with them again. My proud cover was blown. Everyone on the track that day had seen what an amateur I was. But that wasn't what happened. Victor had me ride the same string of horses behind him and Danny for a few laps at the canter. This was all he said. Again, you get behind us and you do it again. This approach to riding, the get back in the saddle attitude, is something that separates horse enthusiasm from real horse people for me. It feels callous when it happens to you. My heart was racing, my pulse still in my throat as we picked up that canter. But making me do the exercise over was a public act of forgiveness and inclusivity, a nod to the fact that we all lose control and make mistakes sometimes. That what had happened was part of riding, that it wasn't a big deal. That they let me keep riding with them, that was the big deal. What happened? Nothing happened, Carlos said, shrugging, when I flouted our new rules and hugged him once he dismounted at the barn. The new rule, he was a little bit flirty with me, so I had kind of a no-touching thing. Thanking him for nothing less than the saving of my life. No pasa nada, he repeated, blushing. You stayed on. And I did stay on. I did not let the horses go. You were going fast, Danny laughed. I would have let them go. It's because she had her grain. He pointed to the bucket Tequila had been eating out of before I rode her. It's because you were gripping her, said the less euphemistic Victor, who accompanied this statement with a grimace and fists curled. You have to relax. Breathe. You let go a little. Don't hold on to them so tight. My rigidity and panic were a disappointment to us both. I wanted so terribly to break on through to the other side, to a place where I could become relaxed in the face of fear. I wanted to build up to a riding ability where the more unsettled my mount was, the calmer I became. Where I sat back instead of forward in tense moments and breathed fluidly instead of holding on to breath. Victor, ever the intuitive when it mattered, could see that I was near tears. You need to get better, and you're not riding a donkey, he said, reaching for a post-ride beer out of a cooler. These horses have blood. You have to be more open. He reached across the trash barrel that separated our chairs and touched 2 fingers to my heart. You have to be more open here. So that was the fear is magic thing for me, and I most of the book is very much about that, about how fear can, in the right doses and protecting yourself as much as possible can be incredibly therapeutic. The third major takeaway is magic, just magic, access to magic. When I was a child, I was a big reader, and I was always drawn to stories like Alice in Wonderland or the 12 Dancing Princesses that involved an overworld and an underworld. Some portal or steps or secret entrance down to a place underground where you could escape whatever your mundane royal life was and dance all night with princes or talk to rabbits or whatever it was. And at that moment for me in 2015 and kind of onward, I really needed that portal to some magic place. Because as much of a gift it is to, be a working writer or be a parent, there's not so much magic in doing the dishes and having a kid who refuses to have her spaghettis touch her meatballs or whatever. Or even like the thing about becoming, realizing a dream to be a published author is that once you publish, there's expectations, right? And you're supposed to sell, and it can change your relationship with your work. But horses gave me that portal back that I really hadn't had necessarily. I mean, I guess you have it as a young person when you're falling in love. You have it when you're having romantic love. But again, I was 17 years into marriage, or 16, and you know, that magic wasn't there every day. So that's the third takeaway, is that, you know, that feeling of entering an underworld or an overworld, but just something different outside of my domestic life, just hasn't abated at all. I mean, I've been doing this almost 10 years, and the minute my tires hit, you know, the driveway of the barn, I might as well be ascending onto a cloud or a world under the sea or something. It's just absolutely magical. And even if things go poorly, I mean, not too poorly, I suppose, but you know, even if it's kind of have like a rough ride or a weird interaction with someone, or, you know, find too many ticks or whatever the heck it is, I always feel that I have, when I come home, I feel that I have traveled to another country, or some magical, mystical place. And it is really how I recharge myself. I try to go every day, but I can't function too well anymore without escaping to that secret private place. And I'm very grateful. I think my husband's finally come around to like gratitude for the horse thing, because I think he now realizes, having met so many of my friends in the book and stuff, that this could have translated to an affair for me. It could have translated to the end of our marriage. It could have translated to alcoholism. It could have translated to a drug addiction, like pretty easily, frankly. Instead, he got a horse girl out of it, which, you know, in some ways is maybe more time consuming, but anyway. So that's the third takeaway. And then the fourth, before we open up to questions or comments, or just chatting, the fourth major takeaway about, for me, horse interaction that has made me not just a better person, but show up in a fuller, happier, more joyful way in all of my identities, so mother, writer, wife, friend, is the nonverbal communication. I don't think I realized this for a while, how powerful the nonverbal communication is with the horses. Because at first, you know, when you're newly starting to ride, it can be a bit frustrating. You know, what do you want? What am I doing wrong? What is the inside leg, outside foot? What does it all mean? Why are the horse's ears pinned? Am I going to get thrown off in the wind? You know, there's so many questions. But once you start to become fluent, I would say, in the nonverbal communication, it's, my gosh, I really think that it makes all of us, even if you're not getting on a horse's back, if you're working in some capacity with horses or just animals in general, I think it makes you so much more attuned and empathetic and a better listener and also a better speaker. And the major thing that it did for me, and again, I hadn't realized this, I hadn't realized that there's just too many words in my life. You know, I was writing books all day and then emailing about those same books, and then, you know, often giving lectures, talking to people about the books. And then how was I relaxing? By texting people, by writing things on Facebook. It was just all verbal. And, you know, I'm not even sure that it was quality. Back then, when you have more time when you don't ride horses. But that means that you have more time for people that are maybe not quality people. You know, and back in 2015, I definitely had some friendships in my life where I'd see the text come in, oh, are we still good for 5 p.m.? And I'd be like, I don't want to see this person, but I would go anyway. You know, I'd spend like weekends away with people I didn't even like.
No.
You know, get into like arguments with people online about a book I hadn't even read. You know, like, what did I do? But once the horses came in, my time management skills and my boundaries became like Fort Knox. And a testament, proof of that is that I've published 5 books with a 6th on the way, and all of them except one came out once I was, with horses. They have, it's like basically a book every 2 years. I have whittled my life down now to like the best of the best people, the best friends, not the best food, because I live in Norfolk, there's no food, but like the best TV show. I finally became a person, if I read in a book, even if it's a friend's and I don't like it, I don't finish it, I don't finish it. And I think a lot of us are getting to that age, and especially with this time in the world, that you do realize that not just that your time is finite, but your time is precious, your time is worth something. And especially as a horse girl, every hour you're with someone, you could be with your horse, So like, they have to be pretty freaking quality people to take me away from my horse. So and there's also, and I write a lot, this is a book that's very much braided with my personal narrative. It's only about 30%, and the rest of the book is sort of historical and reported research of other people's experience. And I did a lot of writing about and interviewing other types of people who have benefited so much from the nonverbal communication, notably people who were taught in a kind of their closed industry not to talk, so military, for example, religion sometimes, so vets, people who have been taught to just take everyone's burden as their own, so that could be mothers, that could be caregivers, and then people like myself who are professional talkers and we get tired of ourselves. And so I think the last thing I'll read, it's very short, is one of the vets who was in this particular chapter is talking about the relief that she experienced from not having to talk. Because a lot of times if you're a survivor of trauma, talk therapy, while beneficial, can be extremely painful and triggering. Revisiting whatever the point of trauma was in speech to another person can sometimes set people back. So this military vet, Air Force veteran, Janine, said, how many people have been just transformed or come out of the pain because they have something that loves them back and doesn't ask them questions, doesn't ask them to work through it, they're just there, asked Air Force veteran Janine McDonald in a filmed interview for Military Times. If you've been hurt, sometimes it's harder to be around other human beings, but there's no judgment with a horse. Another female rider, Sarah Smith, tells The Guardian about her experience with equine therapy in a 2015 video. Words are so limiting sometimes. And of course that's, what you all are doing at Shepherd's Met. One of the many things that you're doing, of course, is helping people who, many people have decided that verbal communication is the best form of communication, the most effective, and the most aspirational. And it's very important to have organizations like Shepherd's Meadow to remember that in fact there's many different forms of communications, and for people who are interested in kind of higher forms of communication, I highly suggest the podcast, the Telepathy Tapes. Yeah, we have some listeners to the Telepathy Tape. Telepathy Tapes is a heavily researched podcast that explores from a skeptical point of view, because the journalist who was doing this was not on board with the thrust of the topic until later. It's looking at the extrasensorial communication skills of nonverbal autistic children. And I won't give any spoilers, but they do talk a lot about animals having higher levels of communication as well, and it's deeply, deeply powerful. And I think if you're already on a journey of starting to respect alternative forms of communication, this will be a nice complement to that journey. So to recap, the four main things for me were being placed in sisterhood with human women and horse women, women horses, fear as medicine, magic, portal to magic, and the power of nonverbal communications. So if we can have a couple questions, and then I kind of brought some chasers. So the Year of the Horse is actually like, there's a lot of humor in this book, and that's my memoir. And if you have any writers in your life, I wrote a book called Before and After the Book Deal, which is effectively what to expect when you're not, or what to expect when you're expecting, but for writers. And that book is really funny. But if you buy, the first 10 or so people who buy a book, you'll get a copy of my romantic comedy Touch, which is very timely. It's about a time when it's written from a woman's point of view, and it's about a time when people are moving away from their devices to try to, have human contact again. But people have been so attracted to their devices that they don't remember like body language and stuff. But it's a very funny comedy. So the first people who buy the books, you get that for free, and that's a very fun. That's a fun read. But anyway, yeah. Do we have time for a couple questions? Okay. Anyway, thank you for listening. Would anyone like to comment or share? Yes.
Yeah, there's a place called the Equus Effect in Sharon, Connecticut. You're familiar with it?
Yes, the
Yeah.
Equus Effect.
Yeah, it's for PTSD for veterans, and veterans who have had problems.
Yeah.
First responders as well.
Yeah, they do a good job. They do a very good
Yeah.
job. I've had horses all my life, and my husband too. So
Okay.
we were Charlotte Hunter Jumper for a few years.
Together? Oh, that's
And I got her involved in horses, and today I'm sharing two horses at 80 years old.
That's so beautiful. Well,
And
thank
yes,
you for sharing.
I'm
All in the
taking
family.
I still ride at 80. I'm going to be 81 in June.
You look amazing. You're 81. Are you
She said,
sure?
Yeah, I said I need to be like you.
Do you have your license? You look like 62 years old.
I don't know. I'm 62 anymore. I the trophy.
Okay, if you say so. I'm not sure. I think that's a fictional age.
I do
but
a lot of the girl girl with her horse Katie now too.
what breed of horse does he?
Hattie is my rescue. She's about 15. She's a halflanger draft mix. And then
Stubborn?
no, she
No?
actually
Amazing.
she was abused. She was beaten
Okay.
and neglected. So I rode her twice. The third time she became a bucking horse.
Okay,
So she's really not safe, but we just love on her.
perfect.
And we
And,
have a connection.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Hattie and I have a connection.
Yeah, I'm sure you
Just
do.
the
Yes.
Yeah.
Just she loves to be loved on. She just gets nervous.
Well, you listened to her
Yes.
though and heard what she needed and didn't
And we
need.
feel
Yeah.
the heartbeats.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
beautiful.
my
home too.
And then we have my baby, my Appaloosa gelding. He's gonna be 3 in June. So
Congratulations.
Thank you.
What's his name?
His is Goose.
Oh, good name.
Rocket in the sky from Top Gun.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The call name.
Yes.
We had a mayor for 22 years, Hunter Jumper.
Yeah.
We loved that mayor.
Yeah.
She had her times.
Yep.
We loved her. We
But they're
kept
so
her to the
loyal.
end.
Yeah.
They're so
And my
intelligent.
grandchildren still ride at Rivendell.
Oh,
in
fantastic.
Durham. And I ride at both farms for JLS and Rivendell.
That's so great that it's all in the family.
And I'm gonna keep it up till I'm 90.
Yeah.
Maybe then I'll quit.
Maybe not.
I'll never stop the hurdle.
Yeah.
The number.
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
never stop that.
No.
Never.
No, you shouldn't.
Because you're right about the vibration.
Yeah. Thank you so
Oh,
much for.
and you mentioned that you rode at Foley Farm too.
Yeah, with Allison at Patricelli. That was where my Motley Crew polo
Yeah.
club was.
Yeah.
She made it.
I have the book here, but I'm gonna buy another one too.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's closed down, unfortunately, but
Yeah.
when Allison was running the polo program at Folly Farm, what was incredible was she just decided that she was gonna make polo affordable. And so she charged $60 an hour. This is a sport that normally costs about, if you're lucky, $350 every 7 minutes.
I just have one quick question.
So, yeah, grass, on the grass.
Do you recommend candy for dairy?
Do I-
My cousin used to own a polo grounds in Farmington, and this horse here I used to take often on the chuckers.
I mean,
He has a highway named after him in Avon.
it looks familiar.
That horse was like, he wanted to be back on.
Yeah.
I was young then.
Some of them really love it.
I was young, so I was able to handle it, and I couldn't handle it now.
Yeah. Would anyone else like ask a question or share? Yes?
Anyhow, great job wrapping everything up. It was
Thank
excellent
you.
presentation. Are you getting any sleep now?
That's exactly what I was gonna say, when can you?
So I had to have 2 surgeries because the first time wasn't successful, and it's not great right now. I was having a lot of relief, and then I'm finding the current moment in this country quite stressful. And also I might be reaching perimenopause, so I'm not sleeping really right now, but now that I'm getting air and oxygen, I find I'm able to handle everything with much more grace. And I'm also not beating myself up so much about taking sleeping pills. I've changed from Ambien, which I don't know how people are functioning on that, take trazodone and edibles, frankly. But so it's better.
Get a little.
It's better, but I just this last week started cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. It took me a while to find a human to do that therapy with, because most people do it on an app, and I can't. My phone's part of the problem, so I don't want to. So TBD, but it's certainly not. It's less severe than before. I'm able to handle it. I have a lot more coping mechanisms, but I'm still really vigilantly always trying to find longer lasting solutions. Yeah.
Quick question about polo. I know they change out the horses.
Yep.
How many in one match?
Yeah. So generally, it's different if you're playing on the grass or if you're playing in arena. I was mostly in arena polo, which was why it was affordable. The minute you're on grass, you have to use more horses. The distances are further. They're galloping the entire time. So generally, a chucker, one segment of a match. A match is usually 6 chuckers. The chuckers are 7 minutes. At a decent level of polo, they'll use 2 horses per chucker, but they can rotate them out. So you could, in theory, play with 4, 3. I mean, but if there's any injury, anything, then so most people don't play with less than 5.
Oh, okay.
In arena, I mean, I wasn't at a very high level, so we would just stay on the same pony. But at higher levels, they might play a whole game with 2, because there's a lot of stopping and start. The distances aren't as far, but then you have the highfalutin people who will roll in with 12 horses. And this is one of the reasons it's not an Olympic sport anymore, is because each player had to come with so many mounts that they didn't have enough stables. No, like they didn't have a lodging for all these horses. So I can't remember when it stopped being an Olympic sport, but so if this interests anyone, in America they're really now trying to push arena polo as a vibrant sector of the sport. Number one, it's much better for the environment, right? These, just like golf, these huge swaths of grass are so precious, because if the horse if there's a divot, someone could die, right? So it really needs to be.
What do you mean by arena polo?
So if you can imagine an indoor riding ring, but a sizable indoor riding ring, usually in the rounds, and at the really good clubs, they'll have bleach. Basically, picture an ice hockey rink, but instead of the ice, it's whatever it is.
But it's not turf. It's like
it's not. It's not generally turf. It's some sort of sand, and the ball is much larger, because it gets stuck in divots. And the rules are different. So it's a bit like, you know how in ice hockey, if you hit the puck against the plexiglass, it'll bounce back. So there's strategies a little bit like in table pool, where you can hit the ball against a wall to get it back. I think it's a lot more fun. Actually, it's more physical, but it's not as fat. It's not this galloping drama. But like UVA and all the higher ed programs in Texas have wildly successful weekends where they set these arenas up sometimes they're outside because it's so dry there,
Mm-hmm.
and they have bleachers and people get popcorn and whatever. And in the beginning they start with the middle schoolers, and then it's the really good high schoolers, and then you get into college, which is next level, and people can really be intimate, like in
Yeah,
ice hockey and watch. So it's very much a sector to
And
watch.
easier on the horses, obviously.
Well, I mean, one could argue that the frequent stopping and starting is difficult on the tendons,
Mm-hmm.
but the movements are not that. They're not galloping flat out and at a pretty. Yeah, and generally the injuries to both the players and the horses are like, knock on wood. I have never heard of a death in arena polo, but grass.
Oh, really?
Yeah, pretty
Of the person or the horse?
person.
Oh.
Horse also, but because I don't know if people know this about polo, but in North America, it's based on a patron system where you have one exceedingly wealthy person, usually a man, who's not a strong rider, but he pays for the entire team. So he's paying, there's 4 players, and he's paying for 3 men, usually men, to play with him, which means he's paying for their grooms, he's paying for their horses, but he's usually not great, and that means that he doesn't understand the rules all the time. So if you don't understand the rules at a low level in arena, maybe you fall off your horse, but if you don't understand the rules in high goal polo and people are going 40 miles an hour and you don't know, you have to stay in your lane, you have to stay behind the ball in a specific lane, but people will go, oh, there goes the ball, and they'll go like this, and so there's T-bone. People get T-boned all the time at 40 miles an hour. So it's a major, so this patron system is under a lot of scrutiny because it's classist, it's elitist, but it also leads to horrific accidents. Yeah. So, but it's interesting to know because if you go to these matches, I remember my first matches, I would go, well, what's happening? Like, that person's going so slow and everyone's letting them have the ball. And the grooms would be like, they're paid to let her have the ball. I'm like, what? They're like, they're gonna give her like 12 seconds and then they'll take it, and then, it's a strange. It's not like that in Argentina where there's more, that's one of the places the game is the most developed, and it's like everyone plays, there's more fields, there's more horses, they don't really, the horses are kept outside, it's ingrained in the culture in a different way, but yeah.
Interesting.
Any other questions
Thank you.
or comments? Thank you for your question. Yeah, it's an interesting sport. And they only let women start playing officially as members of the United States Polo Association in like 1973.
Wow.
And so, I don't know if you all are familiar with the Hale family. There was Sue Sunny Hale and then Sunny Hale after her, who unfortunately she passed away recently of breast cancer, but these were the 2 best American players, the first women to get to the 10-goal handicap, which is as high as you can get. But Sue Sally Hale was one of the best female players in America, but she wasn't allowed to play as a woman. But the men needed her because she was so good. So she banded her chest and she painted on a mustache. And I write about this in the book, and she had to play as a man, even though, until finally the United States Polo Association was like, this is so dumb. She's so good, we'll just have to let women in. And now women's polo is by and away the largest growth sector of the USPA by far. Yeah, it's next chapter. I don't even know what we are on time. I think maybe 1 or 2 more. Does anyone have any more questions or comments? Is anyone here a writer? Is anyone here, interested in working on their own narratives or writing about animals, or you might really enjoy before and after the book deal, but it's writing about participants who can't actually speak is a special challenge, writing about animal life. It was something I talked a lot with my editor about, because most grammatically, if you're talking about a horse, you're supposed to say it or they, right? But as I'm sure you can imagine, our animals are not its, you know, so I usually opted for he or she, which had my copy editor having like aneurysms, but yeah, but in any case, if you do have questions or comments, I'm going to sit here. I would be happy to sign books, and I will say that with Mother's Day approaching, I'm really biased, but I do think that The Year of the Horses is a very nice book for Mother's Day if you want a signed book, or if you have writers in your life before and after the book deal, or if you just love to read. Before and after the book deal, I interviewed over 200 people in the literary world, like major bestsellers, about their worst tour experiences, their worst publicist. It's actually a very funny behind the scenes, you know, insider baseball look at the wacky industry of publishing, with a lot of good fodder for like dinner parties or whatever. But I will very happily sit here. I'll sign anything, and I just thank you so much for your attention. It's a lovely turnout. So
Good.
Can I just say on behalf of
Yeah.